Hello everybody, this is ManOS and it's time for another Eternal Top Decks video series. Been a couple days since the last video series and we have a fairly newly established top deck that it's time to talk about, and it's basically the new incarnation of Killers and finally the first actually good Xenan deck since the release of Set 2 that should have theoretically brought us an even better Xenan deck than before, but between the new stuff for other factions in Set 2 and the change to Power Surge, basically killing old Xenan Killers, made things for Xenan worse rather than better. But due to the latest adventure and some minor changes in the last balance patch, we now finally have a good Xenan deck to talk about. Alright, so let's talk about it. The deck also just won the Invitational in a similar version. I'm going to talk about my current version and why it looks the way it does and why I like the cards I like and dislike the cards I dislike, as usual. Alright, so I would say the core of the deck that almost everyone runs is the Dark Returns. Like some people only run like 2 in their main deck in tournaments and run less, but I think you probably want the full 4 as like a core of the deck. Then you usually see 4 Instigators, 4 Blistering Wasp, 4 Vara's Favor, 4 Initiation, 4 Interrogators. Usually actually 4 Ayan, I only run 3, I'll talk about that in a moment. Some number of Banish, between 2 and 4 usually, 4 Dawnwalker, between 2 and 4 Deathstrike, 4 Titan, between 2 and 3 Obelisk usually. I think I haven't seen 4 yet. And usually at least 2 Carnosaurs, some versions run 0. So basically the core of the deck that's definitely like a 4-off is like Dark Return, Instigator, Wasp, Favor, Initiation, Interrogator, mostly Ayan, Dawnwalker, Titan, and the rest is like adjustable numbers basically, and like 31 to 32 power in total between favors and other power sources. Alright, so I agree with like all the 4-offs that everybody has basically, except for Ayan to a certain extent. Like on ladder actually Ayan is a bit better than in tournaments, but in general I feel like the card is a bit underwhelming. It's a quite situational, and a 3/3 for 3 is still like very underpowered, and for example the mirror, it's not very impressive, especially without like Obelisk, and even with a Xenan Initiation it can't kill anything without dying itself other than opposing Ayan or Instigator. So it's just not that impressive, and I wanted to make room for 2 Sauropods, and right now I like just shaving 1 Ayan for that. Also the 3-drop slot is very clunky, so having only 3 Banish and 3 Ayan makes that much more manageable and a bit smoother. And you know, if you play like a 3-drop on turn 5, because that's all you have, I'd rather just have a Twinbrood Sauropod, for example. The removal suit that I currently run is 3 Banish, 3 Deathstrike. I think 6 or 7 removal is probably right. I think 8 is too much, especially when you have 4 Initiation with Dark Return, Recursion, and Blistering Wasp with Deadly, which also takes care of some units that are just annoying on offense, and you just want to like not be beaten down by them and stop them, and Wasp does that pretty well. So it's also kind of a removal in a way for just vanilla big bodies that don't have like utility that you need to shut down. And there's also Carnosaur. So there's a lot of like inbuilt removal. So that's actually part of the upside of the killer thing and the Initiation, Carnosaur, Dark Return package, that you don't need to play a ton of removal, because removal is situational. Removal, especially the removal in this deck, is very inefficient because it costs 3 and 4 and has its limitations. So having too many of these clunky 1-for-1 removal spells is kind of bad, and you can get flooded with them. So being able to not having to run as many is, I think, one of the strengths of the deck, so I would recommend not running too many. Then, yeah, I have 2 Sauropod, partially because the deck doesn't really have a 5-drop other than the monuments, and also Sauropod is just so good with Dark Return and Initiation. Like if you Initiation a Sauropod and then Dark Return the initiated Sauropod, you're gonna get back a 7/6 killer Echo, so you get 2 7/6 killers, and that just beats a lot of decks. It beats a fair share of control decks, it beats a lot of mid-range decks, and can even like seal the deal against aggro sometimes if you're not fully stabilized yet. It's just very powerful, and we all know how good the Sauropods were in the old version. It even had 3, currently can only fit 2. It's very possible that there should be 3, especially because, in a way, Initiation is even more powerful, because it already turns the Sauropods into a 6/5, making Dark Return turn them into 7/6 killers rather than 6/5 killers as in the old version. And the 2 Obelisks sometimes make them even bigger as like 8/7s or 9/8s. Killing basically anything without dying. And yeah, I feel like this gives the deck some more grind potential and durability, in addition to the Dawnwalkers and like some Ayan ultimate and card draw from Interrogator, especially since we basically lost Friendly Wisp. Also, it gives you more ways to trigger Dawnwalker, which the deck currently isn't that great at. So having some Sauropods is pretty nice there. And yeah, like we basically lost Friendly Wisp because it's like the only card really vulnerable and like a bad target for Vara's favor in a way. And also without the 2 to 3 Beast Callers amulet and generally less things that have 5 or more attack to trigger it, the card is just less reliable, and also it takes longer till you eventually can drop something to draw the cards and so on. And we also got the new Blistersting Wasp, which is actually a really great 2-drop because it plays pretty good defense, is a nice target for initiation, and stays relevant into the late game since it can either attack for some chip damage in the air or simply trade with a good attacker from the opponent, trading upwards in quality and cost. And yeah, Obelisk is not great in a deck like this, as usual, because the deck just plays mostly like standalone individual threats and doesn't really flood the board with units. So there's just not that much gain from Obelisk. Obelisk is mostly here for Auric Interrogator to have like additional ways to turn it on, and some late game power, making cards like Dawnwalker more annoying, making it easier to trigger Dawnwalker, and also making the lifesteal on Ayan a bit more impressive and impactful. Basically, if it wasn't for Interrogator, I would want to run 0. Another upside that Obelisk has is that it lets Carnosaur kill Tavrot, which is also nice. Then yeah, most people only run like 30 or like 31 power, which is ridiculous, I think. Like you want at least 31 as the bare minimum, and I think especially with 2 Carnosaurs, and if you want monuments, you should run 32. Like 4 monuments and 31 is just crazy, especially with like 4 monuments and like a Seek power that's like 5 extra depleted sources, making your seeds pretty bad and everything. It's just your entire power development becomes kind of a stumble fest, which is part of why I don't have Seek, because I feel like between Diplomatic Seal and the other 8 duels, the influence setup should be good enough to not need Seek. And I think you cannot really run 4 Monument, 4 Favor, and 2 Seek to because then your power is just gonna be so slow. You also have to keep in mind for redraws, you draw your power part from your power cards from the power only cards of your deck. So 4 monuments in 28 is definitely a lower chance to get bad monument opening hands on a redraw than say 25 or 26, power cards with Monument and the rest of the power being spell power in the form of Seek. Also, yeah, the thing is, most people run 31 power and 3 monuments, and Monument is just so good that there's no reason to skimp on power and make it more likely to lose because you get power screwed, instead of just playing that Force Monument as an extra power, because especially with Obelisk and Dark Return and Xenon Initiation and Dawnwalker, Amber Monument is almost as good as a real card in a lot of other decks, and better than some real cards in some other decks once you're in the stage of the game where Monument actually becomes a unit. So there's simply no gain in cutting this to reduce my power for like another card, like say the Force Ayan or the third Twinbrood or whatever. But this allows us to more reliably have the power we need, while still, if we have the power we need, not flooding too much and being able to turn our power into relevant impact. And yeah, also this is kind of the amount that has proven like to feel good in these types of decks in the past. Like I think Tiger actually had 1 power more in his old Xenon than I had. I had this power base basically in the old one already, like 28 plus 4, and he had like 29 plus 4, or had like 4 favors, some seeks, and basically 33 power total rather than 32. And 33 definitely isn't justifiable anymore without Conduit, but we still have Sauropod, we have Carnosaur, we have Monument, we have Obelisk, we have Ayan Ultimate, we have Interrogator, extra draws and so on. So there's no need to just risk losing because we miss power drops. And from playing these decks so far, one of the things that was most concerning to me in a lot of games was just having these 2 or 3 power opening hands with a bunch of 4 and 5 cost cards that I'm basically praying to draw the power in time to play them when I need them, and sometimes it doesn't work out, either influence or power-wise, and then you stumble and then you fall behind and lose in this deck. Is much worse when it's behind, because it's not that good at catching up, but it's really good at pulling ahead and staying ahead if you can hit your early power drops due to all the powerful cards and swingy plays that you can make when you're not too far behind. So yeah, and regarding the removal suit, once again, Banish, just very flexible, deals with all the 4 cost or less powerful units in the game, which is the majority of powerful units at this point, and also allows us to deal with cards like Runehammer and Obelisk, Chalice, that sort of stuff. Some of the more powerful relics that can sometimes ruin your day. So it's a bit more flexible than a pure unit removal is, which is nice in some matchups and some scenarios, making it less likely to be dead. Another versatility upside of Xenon currently, basically. And Deathstrike, I hate the card from the bottom of my heart. It's a terrible card. 4 is so clunky for the effect, but it's a necessary evil right now with Tavrot. I could see getting away with 2. Currently I'm leaning to towards 3. It's just a bit safer because of Tavrot, but I'm gonna test more and see if I feel fine just running 2, because the card is just that bad. And it's mostly just Tavrot that kind of makes me play it, and Tavrot is probably less of a problem than I think at this point between Obelisk plus Carnosaur, Dark Return plus Carnosaur, or simply Initiation plus Wasp, for example. Or like Titan plus Initiation with a Dark Return or an Obelisk buff and stuff like that. There's a bunch of ways to deal with Tavrot alternatively, so I wouldn't mind getting rid of a Deathstrike for, say, another Banish or an Annihilate even, because Annihilate is like quite good again, especially against this deck. Hitting Carnosaur, Titan, or an Interrogator that is targeted with an Initiation is a big deal for 2 power and generates a lot of tempo and value. And I would definitely recommend playing Annihilate at least in the sideboard for the mirror for this kind of deck in a tournament. So great card. Again, basically it's becoming better and better. And yeah, that was one of the longer deck techs again, but I think since this deck is like fairly new in this form, and there are like some interesting aspects to talk about, it was worth it to go more in depth and share with you guys what I think and how certain things line up and make sense. Alright. As usual, gonna hop into some games, show the deck in action, so you get an idea of how it plays out and how it performs and what to pay attention to while piloting it. Thanks for watching, stay tuned for the first half of the games in a moment.